everyone. Welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I have a fellow here with me who's been on a Dad Space podcast with me. Oh, and so much more. And super amazing guy, great podcast. And love talking podcasting with someone else who's doing this and doing it well. Mark Gordon's with me. Mark, hey, how are you? Good to see you again.
Great. Good to see you, David. Thanks so much for inviting me to have this conversation. I've been doing podcasting for a while, but I wouldn't say that I'm an expert by any stretch. But I always like to hear what I like about listening to yours is that you hear different aspects. Like even just having conversations with you in the prep of this, I learn things. so you're so knowledgeable. It's just really an honor to be on here with you.
It's fun to talk podcasting, and the idea behind this is our conversation is meant to help the person listening right now to us, and wherever they are on their podcast journey. They could have hundreds of episodes, they could have zero.
Yeah.
But how can we inspire them through our conversation? So to those listening, welcome to the conversation, and would love to get your feedback on today's episode as well. But yeah, it's all in the name, How to Podcast, right? It's kind of right there, and pretty good for SEO if you want to be found. I actually had a listener in the UK. Went to Google and typed in How to Podcast, and ta-da, here we are.
We were.
So
yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
That's awesome.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, picking a good name is important. What other tips would you give to a new podcaster who's just thinking about starting? They have a coaching business. They want to use podcasting to bring more clients into their world.
Yeah,
Where would you start? Where would you start today if you started right now?
I think you got to start with the passion, a subject that you really care about, and then. But I think that the biggest thing is don't get so caught up on, because we watch the professional ones and we don't realize that there's like 4 people behind the scenes to making it look like a production. You don't need that. It's actually the conversation and the subject matter that people care about. That's why they come and listen to you. So if I was starting out, I would have I would worry less about all of the trying to create perfection, and I would just focus on just being really authentic to the subject matter, and then be satisfied with the organic growth. Yeah, there's all kinds of ways. I'm not an expert on that, how to expand that audience, but you said that one story about a client, somebody from the UK. I actually was a guest on a podcast, which is another great way to start, by the way. If you start as a guest, you get used to the rhythms of a podcast, and that can really assist you in helping start your own. So I was on a podcast that I thought was just a podcast, only to find out later it was based in Belize. And it was a podcast with somebody that wanted to talk to me about relationships, because that's my subject. And so he interviewed me, and only to find out that actually his podcast was broadcast on the local local TV station that went all over the Caribbean. And all of a sudden, my inbox had an influx of people looking for coaching on relationship coaching. And I ended up with clients from Trinidad, from Jamaica, from Belize, from all over, that I would never have reached otherwise. And so it's really good to be a guest. And I noticed one thing as a guest: whenever I was on someone else's podcast, my podcast took an upswing, and also my book sales took an upswing, because they'd go to my website and they would find all that I offer. And so it's just really good. Now, I caution, I don't do that just for marketing. I don't like pure marketing. I like value add. So that's kind of how I would say, if you're starting out, be a guest a few times, get used to the cadence and the rhythms of a podcast, and then just be passionate about your subject and be generous. Share. Like, this isn't just about, even you and I, David, we were introduced by somebody else that I was a guest on his and he was a guest on mine. And now we are, hopefully can do that too. And so I think if we can be generous with each other in the podcast community, listen, there's lots of great people out there doing great podcasts.
Yes. I like the idea that podcasting has no borders.
Yeah.
And our voice can go anywhere. That's great, right? That's that's so unique for me when I get a little message comes into me from a listener or someone who's inspired to start a show based on our conversation, for example.
Right.
That means everything, right? Because that's filling a gap, filling a void for someone, and inspiring someone.
Exactly.
Who inspires you in life in general terms? Who is the one that kind of keeps you on path to keep going forward?
Well, I have a few people. I have always say the best coaches have coaches. So I have a few people that, in fact, in my book, I talk about, in the last section, I talk about the metaphors about building a house. If you want to build a home that stands the test of time, so you need a sturdy roof. And I talk about people you invite into your life to speak into your life to give you help you are all shingles in the roof. And so what I do is I have people great people that are doing great work. And so I would call them if I needed help. I would call them and get advice or whatever. And especially if they're other podcasters, but also other speakers. I get very inspired by people who are passionate about what they do. And so yeah, I'm also inspired by the big names that everybody knows, Patrick Lenoci and some of these John Maxwell and all these leadership gurus. But I actually really enjoy the people nobody knows and listen and come across such an amazing podcasts here and there. And so I'll usually reach out if I find one, like I did you. Somebody referred us together, and it was like, now I would call you in a minute if I needed help.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what keeps me inspired. Of course, my family and, the usual answers, right? Like they keep me going. It's interesting because I wouldn't say, I'm certainly not well known, and my podcast doesn't have thousands and thousands of listeners. And I was going to give up because I thought, well, who's listening? Who want, if they're not listening, why am I talking? And then I'll get a message from somebody and say, man, I heard your podcast and it just touched my heart so deeply. It was exactly what I needed to hear. And then it's like, wow, I didn't even know you listened. I didn't even know you found that out. I was at a function one time in town, and a fairly influential person in our area, very wealthy business couple that owns multiple businesses and whatnot. And I'm at this function, and she comes up to me and she just says, Mark, your book changed my life. Your podcast I listen to it every time. Thank you for doing it. It's like, okay, don't give up.
Yeah, right.
Because you know what? Here's the thing. If it's for one, then you've accomplished your goal. If you've changed one life, if you've influenced one life, whatever, depending on what your podcast subject is, but if you've impacted one life, isn't it worth it? Like, I think it's worth it. And the other thing is, a few years ago, I decided one of the reasons I started a podcast and wrote a book is because I'm 62. So I started thinking about legacy. I thought, what am I going to pass on to my children? Not financially, not economically, but like character wise and nature, and we've, I've got great relationships with my kids, my adult kids, but what about my grandkids, and what about their kids and their kids and their kids? And I felt like, even if nobody else listens to this, my family can go back and listen to these and watch ones I've been guests on, and they can hear my heart and hear, some of the principles that I live by. And when they align with what they see in my life and they hear me talking about it, I think it does something in their hearts as well. In fact, I interviewed my son in one of my podcast episodes, and that was a great episode, just to hear his heart. Like, he's talking and I'm thinking, man, he knows more than I thought he did.
Yeah.
And then I also interviewed my wife in another one. So I just thought, you know what? It's about relationships. Why not have the closest people to me? I asked my daughters, they were too scared to come on. I'll keep working at them.
I love the idea of legacy. Like, I lost my dad many, many years ago. And for me to hit play on his episode, I would love to have that. I don't have it, but I would love to just have that as in my library that I could go to anytime I want. So
totally,
that's an amazing idea. And I guess in a way, being a podcaster, you can be selfish and create this for yourself as a legacy in that sense where even if no one listens, I want this for my family, and that's perfectly fine. That is a great way to to build a podcast, and you don't need a mattress sponsor and a supplement sponsor and none of that stuff. You're just doing this because you want to share this with your family. That is a great reason to start a podcast.
I think so. And you know what? It's interesting because some podcasts that are now more famous, not done by famous people, but they've got traction, and now they do have sponsors and they do have all these things. But they'll all tell you they started just for the love of it, for the subject matter and whatnot, and then it took off. And so you never know what's going to happen. I still hope, it only takes one of my episodes to go viral, and pretty soon, yes, you can actually put an economy behind it. And yes, there is ways of making money with podcasts, but if that's my first motivation, it doesn't carry as much for me personally. It just doesn't carry as much passion, or it wouldn't keep me going just for the sake of that. But knowing I'm helping people who have maybe had struggles in relationships, who have maybe had, haven't heard some of the principles that I teach. And I've had so many people say, well, that's the first time I've ever heard that. And so I like that. And so that's kind of my motivation. And as we go, it grows. Consistency is huge.
Oh yeah. 100%. We've kind of danced around your book. Tell everybody who hasn't met you yet. Tell us about the book, and let's promote that right here in the middle. It is.
I wrote a book called Relationship Matters, and it's basically the essential blueprint for building strong families and building healthy relationships. And so my heart was, I saw coming out of in 2020, just seeing COVID, and I always call it the great revealer. And I started to see the destruction that was happening. Now, I had already played around with podcasts. I had done a leadership lunch, I called it, and I used to just jump on. And this is back when podcasts were just kind of getting popular. And it was really just for my own team. I was leading an organization at the time and whatnot. But then with COVID, I stepped out of leading that organization and started a coaching practice. And so Relationship Matters book just came out of that passion to help bring these principles I learned in my healing journey to the people. Then I decided to start the podcast during COVID. And so I'm on my second season, but I started it during COVID, and by the same title, Relationship Matters, but Empowering Conversations is the subtitle. And I just thought, you know what? People are really struggling. They got the kids home 24/7. They're it's starting to show the cracks that were probably in there that they could cover up by being busy, and now they can't. And so I thought, you know what, this is a time to have a conversation. So I get guests on that have either had lived experience, or are in the field and helping other people with different, like parenting coaches and different ones. So I cover, but it's not just for families. I've kind of an outflow of it is that some businesses have been listening to the podcast, and they find that the principles translate into organizational health as well. And so it's been an interesting journey that way. And so the subjects are all they're all within relationship, but they kind of cover the broad spectrum of between parenting, marriage, teams, all that kind of stuff. So it's been a really fun project.
Interesting. Nice segue. How does Relationship Matters manifest with your podcast audience?
Not sure. Reframe the question. I'm not sure what you mean.
I'm just thinking, just take the model of your book and what you've written, what you share.
Right.
How would this relate to your listening audience in building relationship that way?
Yeah, it relates completely, but it also leaves them wanting more. They have more questions, and so they kind of work together. But here's how I've practiced this, and I think this is great if you're a coach and you want to start a podcast. What happens is in coaching, you don't have the time in the sessions to do the teaching. So coaching is not teaching, okay? But there's principles that can be taught that will help the client put into practice the coaching discoveries you're making in the conversations. And so what I've done is I've married the two. So I will do coaching with them in the session, but then I send them to my website to watch videos, to watch my podcast, to listen to the podcast, to read the book, so they get the teaching component of it. it's me doing the teaching, so they feel a connection, and then they get the teaching. And then when they come to the session, they come with questions and they say, you said this and that, whatever. And we're struggling with that. Can we explore that a little bit? And so what it's done is it's created a great synergy between the teaching and the coaching. And that's really helped, because I found, just from pure coaching point of views, to ask questions, the answers within the person. So you're trying to draw it out, the answers out of them. But there also is some real solid principles of healthy relationships that are there. And so I found myself in the sessions doing a lot of the talking, and I shouldn't be doing the talking in a coaching session. But it was because I felt I needed to teach them certain principles. It's amazing to me, but even in schools don't teach about how to have healthy relationships. Universities don't teach about having health. Nobody talks about it. Nobody really talks about having a healthy relationship. Very rarely, unless you're someone like me who has got a passion for it. And so what I've found is a lot of people just don't even know how to have a healthy relationship. And so the teaching component became very important to the outcomes of the coaching. And that's where I find podcasting so valuable.
I like it. Talk a little bit about how you structure your podcast, how you record it. You do something unique and different that I think a lot of people could maybe try. Talk about the way you actually do your recordings for your podcast.
Yeah. So what I do is I use, I don't know if we're supposed to.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I use Streamyard. Yeah. And the reason I use Streamyard is because I can put an intro, I can use Canva and create a really good intro, little music intro video. And then I have like what the show is about, a picture of the guest, who the guest is, and all that kind of stuff. And that is like a 30-second intro. And then it cuts away to myself and the guest. I can also bring slides up if I want to, or pictures up, or videos up during the interview. So that kind of helps as well. And then what I do that's different is I record it like we're live. So the first season, I actually recorded live and sent it out to all the platforms. StreamYard will send it to multiple platforms. So I'd send it to Facebook, to LinkedIn, to YouTube, all at the same time. And every once in a while, I'll still do one of those. But for the most part, what I found after the first season, it was really hard to get guests, because I was trying to do it the same time, the same week, just like a TV show. Yeah. I was trying to do the same time, same day each week, and it just was really hard to find guests that could come at that time. So what I did was I decided I was going to shift it, and that's another little tip, by the way. Don't be scared to shift things and change up the look and change up the way you do it, because I think experimental activity is really good in podcasting. So be experimental, right? So I decided I was going to shift it up for season 2. And what I did, but I loved the live feel. Like it was good. Like when I went live, we had people commenting and asking questions, and it was very interactive. I loved that. But the second season, you lose that interaction piece. But I wanted it to still feel like we're live. And so what I did is I record it like we're live, like we're actually sending it out. And so I do the intro video, we do the, all the different things right within that. And then what we do is I take the audio part and upload it to Anchor, which sends it out to all the different podcast platforms. And then I take the video part and put it on YouTube. Now, what I do with the YouTube one is I use the premiere feature. So we're premiering this podcast, which means it presents like it's live. It's a live premiere. And so I send out notice, I'm going to do, premiere videos coming out, and then I will go and hit premiere. The nice thing about it is that I watch with the people watching, because we're all watching it. It's like a watch party. We watch, we're watching at the same time because it's a premiere. And then I can respond in comments as people ask questions or they say things. And I tell people that in the video, hey, just, ask your questions. I'm going to be watching the comments when this airs, and we're going to, we can answer your questions.
So smart.
Yeah.
It's so smart. Because when you're doing it live, and doing it, recording live and doing the chat and interviewing and hosting, doing all of these things, wearing all these hats, something's going to fall off, right? I love the idea that you just do it separately through the Premiere thing. How long have you been doing the Premiere version through YouTube?
I've been doing that on the second season. After the first few episodes, I kind of thought, well, let me try this Premiere thing, and I tried it. It's actually pretty easy. It's just when you upload, in the upload process, it takes you through all the things you have to, and then it asks you, do you want it, to save it, or do you want to? Is it for public? Is it whatever? But then there's a Premiere. If you click Premiere, it actually will send it out. You can even do a countdown off that Premiere if you don't have it. If you don't using StreamYard, just have a Zoom. It'll actually provide you with a countdown to the Premiere. So YouTube actually provides it, and you can pick from different pictures and screenshots that come with it, and it'll be a 30-second countdown or a minute, whatever you want. And so it's actually worked out really nice. Now not everybody can watch it live. The thing is, it's evergreen. So even once the Premiere is over, anybody can watch it anytime.
Yeah.
So
it's a nice combination. I really like that, Mark. That's great.
I kind of fell on it.
Well, now you're the expert on that. Because you're doing it. Hey, if you're doing it right, you're the expert. There you go. Because I haven't even tried it. I think it's a great idea.
I have a feeling that I'm probably missing stuff in it, but hey, it's working for right now, and so hopefully we keep growing. Like I said, it's experimental. Be experimental. Don't worry if it fails or flops or whatever. And for goodness sakes, don't let likes and comments and engagement be your motivation. Yes, we have to watch those things, but don't let your encouragement or discouragement be rising and falling on that. Look at it, listen to it back. If you said the things that were in your heart to say, or your interview went really well and it flowed nicely, that's success. Just get it out there. You never know. Yeah. Now, the second thing I've been doing recently is when I'm not in a season, or I haven't been able to get a guest, and so maybe a week or two goes by. I don't like gaps. I like consistency. What I'll do is actually play an old one. I'll replay one and say, hey, here's a retro last season, listen to this conversation. And actually that's been interesting because a whole new audience listens to it now, because maybe, my audience has grown, but maybe they've come from other places as well. Not just, I got new coaching clients, or I got new people, and they don't necessarily go back and look at all the old ones. They look at the most recent. So I find that reposting some old ones can really help.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Again, if you're on episode 20, your new listener is going to find you on episode 20 for the first time. And again, they might not go back to episode 1. Yeah. I would love it if they do, but they might not. So don't be afraid to share past content. Yeah. That's great. It's a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't do it at first because because you listen to all these different webinars and whatever, and it's like, you got to be fresh. You got to be, current. You got to be, and I thought, oh yeah, I guess I can never, I play it once and that's it. No, play it 6 times if you have to. Like if it's, you don't know who's going to watch it, what time. So don't limit yourself. So in the off seasons, like everybody does it differently. I do seasons where I go, 20, 30, 20 episodes, I think was my limit. And so I do 20 episodes, and then I waited, it was almost 6 months or 8 months later, and I did another 20. I've got to figure that rhythm out yet. I haven't completely dialed into what I want there, but what I am doing is when I'm not recording fresh ones, share more of the old ones, keep sharing them. So you've got content there. The other thing is you can take a little clip. I've been taking clips out of my podcasts, and I actually am just playing a clip on shorts or on reels. And that will bring people to your audience as well, because you might have a mic drop moment like many podcasts do. And you have this mic drop moment where something comes out and it's like, whoa, we got to capture that. And so I've been now starting to look at, I've been just paying attention. I'll go through, if I have some extra time in a week or find myself a canceled appointment, I'll look through a few of my old videos or my old podcast episodes, and then I'll just take a little 1-minute clip out of it. Boom.
Nice. The other thing I've been encouraging a lot of my past guests, when they come on my show, is to take their interview that I release on YouTube and put it into their own playlist.
Yes.
And get every time that you're guesting anywhere else, put it into your own playlist that you have through your site. You can share it. You can put in your email signature. You can post it on your website, whatever, social media. But it's you being on someone else's show. Because in conversation with a host, they might ask you questions about things you don't normally talk about with your audience. And they get to hear new stories, new insight about you that you might not think to write down or share, or you might not even think are that interesting.
What a fantastic idea.
It's an amazing way for your audience to get another side of you that they're not used to seeing.
Yeah, what a
because
fantastic
you're in the
idea.
passenger seat, right?
Exactly, because like when we're hosting, we're just asking questions, letting the guests do the talking. It's such a fantastic idea, David. Wow, that's awesome. That you mentioned it to me when we were prepping it, and I just thought, wow, like that's a fantastic idea. Because it's so
and
true.
in the world of YouTube, they can actually take that same playlist of you on other shows. You can brand it as another podcast.
Right.
And you don't have to create any content about it at all.
Wow.
But it could be the Mark Gordon Does Podcast Guesting or Mark Gordon Guests.
Right.
You can call it whatever you want. And it could be something that lives on YouTube, renamed from a playlist into a podcast, which I just did an episode about. And we're going to work together on that and help you with that. But you can just rename a playlist as a podcast within YouTube. It's not going to go out to Apple and Google and all that, but it's going to live inside the world of YouTube and be searchable. And anytime you go to a new show and you guest on another episode in the future, simply add it to that playlist, which is now quote unquote a podcast on YouTube, and it just keep building your content. And you don't have to do anything. Yeah. Just show up and be a guest on a show. It's a great way.
That's amazing. That's a great way to do it. Like if anybody's thinking of starting a podcast and you're nervous about, but you don't, on how to do everything, all the technical thing, just get yourself to be a guest on as many as you can. And you can, what you're saying is you can take those guests and create a podcast called me as a guest or whatever, right? Yeah. That's amazing. What a great idea.
And it's also a great way when you're reaching out to be a guest and the host says to you, do you go on podcasts? Oh yeah, I'll give you my link to my podcast, quote, quote, on YouTube. And here's me guesting on all these shows.
Wow.
It's like, well, now I get to hear you. I can see you. I can pick up on the fact that you are an expert now on premieres on YouTube. And I want you on my show to talk about that, Mark. So I can pick up and listen to you and I can get a good sense about what you would be like on my show in the future as a host.
Right.
So it's a great business card as well.
Yeah.
You're going to bring people to your content, but it's also something you can say, hey, look at me. I do guesting on shows. It's a great tool.
What a fantastic tool. That's amazing. I love that. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.
Okay, I have a question for you, and I think you're a great person to answer this question.
Sure.
I had one of my listeners on the show ask me about mic fright, and I never really heard these words together, but microphone, the fear of being on the microphone, mic fright.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's interesting because they are new to this. They have never sat in front of this contraption pointed at their mouth. And as soon as that little record button, we have a little red icon blinking above our head right now, they turn into a different person.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's like now, stage fright in some ways. Right?
You've done speaking for years. You've been in front of the microphone leading and doing all that. Can you go way back in time to the beginning? And like, I can remember standing up in front of like 700-800 people as a 20-year-old and speaking to a large group of people.
Yeah.
And my stomach's in knots and I'm afraid I'm going to make a big mistake. And it's no editing because it's live. So like all of this pressure and then kind of how you've developed your mic technique over time to be more comfortable and relaxed as a host.
Right.
Can you go way back and kind of help people who are there right now going, I'm so afraid, Mark, of talking on this black microphone thing.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Well, I would just first 3 words. I'd start off with 3 words. Not for me. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for others. So first and foremost, that mic represents other people's ears. So I'm speaking into this mic, I'm speaking into someone's life. And so right away that takes, but a practical tool, when I first started even podcasting, although I had many years of speaking and using mics, so I didn't have mic fright when I started podcasting, but I used to keep the mic below the screen level. I would have it even like below, I'm on a laptop, I'd have it below my laptop, so I didn't even see it. I keep my eyes at the camera, so I'm looking at the audience. That's another tip, by the way. When I look at you, it looks like I'm not looking at the people that are listening. Yeah, I try to, if you notice, I try to look at the camera as much as possible. And so when I'm looking at the camera, I can't see the mic, so that can help as well. But I think the first part of that is the other piece of this is that at first, when I heard my voice recorded, it was a bit off-putting sometimes. And I could hear my ahs and ohs and my hesitations and all of those kinds of things. But here's the deal. If you don't listen to that, you don't get better. And what I learned was about mic management is if I want to make a point, I want to talk quieter, but get closer. And so I'll lean in. So I'm leaning in to somebody and I get quieter. And the mic comes and I say, hey, listen, this is really important. I want you to hear this. Right. And now you've got their full attention. So I use those kinds of techniques all the time. Even when I'm speaking live, I spoke live last night at an event and I would do the same thing. I got quieter when I wanted to make a point so everybody would tune in. Some people like to yell when they're speaking. I go the opposite, but I would do that. I learned that technique when I was actually doing I co-produced a program called the Heroes Program in the school system. Grade 8s, you can imagine a grade 8 class. They're like all over the place. And the teachers, I could always tell within 5 minutes if they're good teachers or not, because the kids, how they tuned in would tell me whether they had the respect, the teacher had their respect. But I would have teachers tell me all the time, I'm just amazed. How do you keep these guys so focused and so centered? Well, I use the mic techniques or the voice techniques to help do that. So I would get quieter when I was making a point. Hey guys, this is really important. And I'd get quieter. And if they were talking, some people were in the back, they would police themselves. Shh, I'm trying to hear this. Mark's going to say something important. Be quiet. And then they would all tune in, right? So in the same way, if you have mic fright, you have to first and foremost realize that the mic represents people's ears. Nothing to be scared of. This is like having a conversation at Starbucks with somebody. And that's another thing. You can use visualization, look at the camera, realize the camera is their eyes and the mic is their ears. And you just simply, I'm speaking to you like I'm having a conversation with somebody at Starbucks. And that's really will help you get over that fright. And then the second piece, like I say, listen back. And you'll learn the cadence and rhythms of the voice. And, mic settings can help, give you a better tone and all that. But I don't play with that kind of stuff. I want to be authentic. So if you meet me, that I talked to Mark hey, that's Mark. I heard him on a podcast, so I want it to be as natural as possible.
Yeah. When I met with that gentleman in England who searched up how to podcast, we came on Zoom like this to meet each other for the first time. Because he wanted some questions, he had some questions about his podcast and everything. And as soon as I started talking, he just looked at me like, "You're the guy. You're the guy I've been listening to. You're the voice." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's me. It's I don't have a voiceover person. It's me." Yeah. What about that whole thing about hearing your voice for the first time recorded and people struggling with that? I know there's science behind how our voice bounces around inside of our head and all that is that part. But for somebody struggling and they're like, "Oh, my voice, I don't know, Mark. I don't know if I can do this." What would you say to them?
I would just say that it's the words you speak are more important than the voice you use. And so I would say, listen, you may not like the tone of your voice or the sound of your voice recorded, but it's not actually the tone and the sound that make the big difference. It's the words that you're speaking. So try to hear, like, ask yourself, have I conveyed what my heart was in this podcast? Listening back to this, was my heart conveyed? And I got to tell you, when I do this, and I do it regularly, even now, I watch all my episodes because I want to get better. But I listen to them, and I'll have like those mic drop moments. And when I'm in the middle of it, I'll say something and it's like, that was good, But then when I listen back, I think to myself, that was really good. Like, that just came out of me. Where did that come from? I don't get all arrogant about it. It was like, wow, that was amazing. That, and a good interview, like you draw good stuff out of your guests. I try to do that as well. And so again, what can help with this is to be a guest on a few podcasts, because you're not going to be thinking about that as much. When you're actually starting a podcast, you're thinking about all the details and you got lots in your head about it. That can even knock you off. It's unsettling a little bit. You got so many things to focus on when you're doing your first one. Maybe do a few guest ones will help you kind of sink into that. You'll hear your voice because you're going to go back and listen to it. And then maybe that will take some of that fear away of getting your own mic in place.
Yeah. Keep in mind your listener all the time, because your listener, at the end of the day, this is why we're doing this, right? I listened to a podcast episode and I couldn't tell if it was that they edited and took all the silence out between all the little pauses that naturally happen in our conversation, or if the guest was really nervous because they were doing 100 miles an hour and I was out of breath listening.
Right.
Like, I felt anxious as a listener, like, why are we talking so fast? Why, like, is like the door closing? The doors. Yeah. I got to get my words in before this all stops because it's blah, blah, blah. They're like talking under the door as it's getting closer to the ground. Yeah. And I'm like, why are we so rushed? Why can't we just slow down? And as a listener, my tension level was going up as the episode went on. I had to stop. Good content, but I just couldn't follow.
And here's the thing. Be relaxed. I agree 1,000% with you. Let's just be relaxed, be yourself. Because guess what? The listeners can actually listen at 1.2 times. If they're in a hurry and they want to listen fast, then let them listen fast. But don't force them to listen fast by doing that. So just be relaxed, be yourself. And you know what? Sometimes pregnant pauses are good. Sometimes those moments of silence actually are okay. I know in broadcasting they say you don't want blank sound, especially on radio. You don't want a blank sound, but it's not the end of the world in a podcast. And at the very minimum, maybe just say, I'm going to think about that for a second. Stay with me. Yeah, this is what I think. Right? We just did that. It's an awkward pause sometimes, but it's not necessarily bad. And so I think that helps a little bit.
And what happened earlier, just in our conversation, I threw a question to you, and maybe I wasn't as clear as I thought I was in my head, but you're like, can you just kind of ask me that again, basically? Because I'm not getting that one. And see, that's what I love. That's real, and I'm thinking, that probably could have been done better. As it left my mouth, I'm like, no, I'm not even close to what I'm trying to ask. But that's it. We're human beings. We're doing this.
And you might have asked it just fine, but I just wasn't hearing fine.
Yeah. No, see.
Communication's always bi-directional. So it's okay to take the time and rest into that. By the way, when I started the first podcast I didn't have a mic. I just used the computer, like right off the computer mic. I didn't know any better. And then I saw somebody with like a setup like yours, and I thought, oh, maybe I should have a mic. So I mentioned it to my son, who's a musician, and I just said, I was thinking maybe I should have a mic for my podcast. What do you think? And he said, you're not using a mic? I said, no. He said, I'll be over later. And he went and bought me one and brought it to me. And this is the one I use. Yeah.
There you go.
So good. Love it. A good boy.
I love it.
And then lights, great. I didn't have lighting and all that kind of stuff. Now I do. I have lighting, and I have a bit of a studio at my office, and then I have where I'm at home right now. This is my home office, and I have a ring light just behind the computer screen here, and nice. And it doesn't have to be expensive. My studio lights, I think, that I use, and I use those more for my like training videos that I do, because I just want a professional look. But I think I paid like $99 for them. LEDs is so cheap, like you don't have to spend a lot of money. Go on Amazon, find them cheap. They had a deal on. I ordered them. I wondered what they would be like, but they were really good. They worked just fine. So
Yeah,
I bought
not
this
hot either.
I bought this ring light that I have now, and it's got like a little remote with, I can do different colors and all kinds of stuff.
Look at you.
I bought it used off of Marketplace, and I think it was $15 or $20. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars on a podcast. You really don't. Yeah. So
amazing. Okay, Mark. I know you're taking time out of your day today. I appreciate it. For the listeners, again, thinking about starting a show, specifically those with a coaching business, what do you see as the big advantage of having a podcast to support what you do with your clients? Yeah. What's a big win for you, and how does this serving you?
It's a huge win. For one thing, it helps me think out loud because I'm a verbal processor, so it lets me think out loud. Secondly, it gets content to my clients that they would not have had otherwise, and it keeps them in my orbit. I call it the relationship matters ecosystem, right? It's like it keeps them in my orbit because they're comfortable with me. They've been able to trust me, and so it's helped hugely. I would suggest if you're thinking of this, why don't you do 5 episodes? Just start doing with 5 episodes. Do a pilot. Maybe get some feedback from a few family and friends, and say, what do you think of this? And then if they say, yeah, tweak it here, tweak it there, do the tweaks and do 4 more, and then release 5 in a row and just see how it goes. Just see how it goes. See what the feedback is. And I'll just say this, I can't speak for you, David, but I'm sure you'd be happy. If you are serious about this and you're just getting started and you could use a boost, I'm happy to come and be a guest on yours. And I'm sure David would as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We would come and be guests on yours to help you just produce a good quality podcast, right out of the gate. As you can tell by our conversation, we're seasoned talkers.
Yeah.
And so if we're just going to say, if you're listening to this and you come across it, reach out to either one of us. We're happy to help you out and be there for you and just experiment. You know what I'll just close with this. I had a guy in New Jersey that connected with me because of the podcast. He was thinking of doing a podcast, but he wasn't totally confident, but he loved my focus on relationships. And he was in a business, and he actually worked in the area with the MBA in marketing and whatnot. And so he wanted to do something with legends of the MBA because he knew them. He had met them through the years. And he said, but he was kind of nervous. So I said, I'll tell you what, why don't we do a summer series? And so we did a summer series about relationships, and he was the host, and he interviewed me, and we just put I think it was maybe 5 or 4 or 5 episodes together, and it gave him the confidence to move ahead. And now he has a Legends. He interviews like superstars of the NBA, and he just talks about life after basketball. And so I just thought it was so cool that I could be part of that, just simply because he heard me, and then we talked about it. And he's become a good friend. We've never met in person. It's all been like this. It's all been on Zoom.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing? That's what I love about podcasting. The community is so rich in generosity and love, and so we're all in this together, folks. So hit us up if you need help.
Amazing. And if you want to up your relationship status, grab Mark's book. Make sure you buy that and support Mark as well. And take a listen to his podcast. We're going to have links to your podcast. Tell us about your website as well, Mark.
Yeah, markgordon.ca. It's Canadian, so we're the Canadian boys. So markgordon.ca, and everything's on there. You can all my links to the social, to YouTube, to the podcast, to coaching to online courses, all kinds of stuff. Just go to markgordon.ca. And if you can reach out to me through there, like contact with or do a discovery call, you can actually just book the appointment right on there. And so if you're listening to this and you do want help with the podcast as a guest, just send me one of those and we'll have a 15-minute chat to see if it's a fit and if I can help you. And I'm happy to do that.
And if you're a podcaster using YouTube and you want to try Premiere option that Mark was talking about, maybe catch one of the future episodes with Mark and sit in and be part of the chat and participate that way. It's great if you're a podcaster and you want to learn how to do it. Leverage what Mark's already doing and kind of come in behind him and learn from him as he's doing it with his audience. That's a great tip, Mark. I'm going to be doing that myself now, listening to you. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing such great wisdom. That whole Mike Fright thing, I think you really gave us some amazing insight onto that. And I really appreciate that. Thank you for making time to be part of the How to Podcast show.
Thanks, David. I'm happy to serve, and I'm just so grateful for you, and the work you're doing is just invaluable. So thanks so much.
It's fun meeting great new people. And if that alone is a reason to start a podcast, then start a podcast, because you get to meet great people like Mark and makes your world better by having good people in your life. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.